And I want to welcome everyone to our OSEP June Technical Assistance Call. I want to thank state staff for all their hard work developing the FFY 2020 SPP APRs. We know that a tremendous amount of work has gone into that process, and we appreciate your efforts. Here at OSEP, MSIP staff have been carefully reviewing states' submissions and developing the OSEP response for each indicator. We're approaching the final part of this process, which is making the Section 616 determinations for each of the 116 states and entities that submitted SPP APRs. And as I'm sure you know, the determinations are required by statute and regulations. During today's call, Christine Pilgrim, the Associate Director who leads our SPP APR process, will walk us through the determination process so that you know exactly what to expect when determinations are issued later this month. Before we begin, I want to express my appreciation to Christine and members of the data implementation team who've been working around the clock to complete all the reviews. Also, I want to give a big thanks to Diana Yu, our MSIP special assistant, who's been generously pitching in to keep the process moving. All right, Christine, I think we're ready to hear from you.
All right, thank you so much, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining the call. Greg mentioned, I'm grateful that he talked about that level of appreciation for the team. While you might be seeing my face here, the work really can't happen without all hands on deck across our data implementation team, and even staff who are not on our data implementation team who pitch in and roll up their sleeves and try to get to the end with us. This statutorily required process also happens along with, grants going through the door and getting ready for that. So it's a pretty busy time for us, as I'm sure it's a busy time for you as well. So I hope you're continuing to take care of yourselves during this busy time. You can go to the, oh, good. See, we're simpatico. You're on the slide I need you to be on. Awesome. Thanks, Shoshana. So as we do each year, we just wanted to share with you some important information prior to issuing determinations. So during today's calls, we're going to review our timelines, describe some of the documents you will find posted for your state in the EMAPS reporting tool, and discuss what will happen after determinations are issued. I don't anticipate that it'll be a long call. Last year it was not, and this year it will be much of the same sort of tenor. But there will be time at the end for questions if you have any. So in terms of what to expect, you can probably skip 2 slides, Shoshana. Awesome. So determinations going to be issued in 2 weeks. I'm sure they will fly by, even though for me it will feel like time is moving slowly and quickly at the same time. So determinations for Part C are going to be issued on June 22nd and June 23rd for Part B. Those dates are noted in EMAPS. If you log into the reporting tool, there's a timeline up at the top. So if you ever forget when determinations are going to be issued, it's flagged right there. So 2 weeks from now, Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be issuing determinations. We have a series of very rigorous quality control checks that occur before everything is finalized and ready to go through the door. So sometimes, it might not be happening as early in the day as you want it to be, because we were furiously trying to make sure that everything is as it should be before we hit that final button. But, just hang in there. It will happen on those 2 days. As was the case last year, Greg is going to send an email to chief state school officers and lead agency directors, letting them know that the system is open to view the determination letters in OSEP's response to state submissions. Also, PSC generally sends out a blast to all users the second I sort of release everything back to you guys in the system. So you'll also get those emails letting you know that the system is open for you to review. Next slide, please. So in the EMAPS SPP APR tool, states are able to review sort of a number of documents. Not only are you able to see OSEP response and required actions under each of the applicable indicators, but you're also able to see all of the attachments. Some are ed attachments, which are attachments we upload in the system for you. And then you might have had some that you uploaded in the system for us, albeit a few this go around, and you would also find those there. So in terms of attachments, you're going to see an RDA matrix. It's individualized for each state. And it includes your state's determination, the percentage based on both compliance and results scores for Part B and Part C states. Just a reminder, or in case we have new folks in states right now, the percentage is 50% results, 50% compliance for B, for Part B and Part C states. And for the entities, the RDA percentage is calculating using a 60% compliance and 40% results weighting. You'll see scoring on all of the compliance indicators and any other compliance factors, and also the scoring on the results indicators and other results factors. You'll find a data rubric that shows how OSEP calculated the state's timely and accurate state reported data score in the compliance matrix, so that data rubric will be attached as well. You'll find a copy of your state's determination letter, the how the department made determinations document that provides a very detailed description of how OSEP evaluated and scored the state's data. And finally, a PDF entitled Dispute Resolution 2020 through 2021, which includes your IDEA Section 618 data that we use to calculate the timely state complaint decisions and timely due process hearing decision scores in the compliance matrix. Next slide, please. Specific to our Part C state friends, as was the case last year, the department is not going to be posting ICC forms. We will acknowledge the receipt of your ICC form in the OSEP response under the introduction. Starting last year, we took into consideration the challenges that programs have had trying to make ICC forms compliant after adding a signature, and in an effort to ensure that all programs have the same information posted online. Last year, we made the decision not to post them publicly and just acknowledge receipt, and we will do that again this year. Next slide. So as you know, in the SPP APR in package, when we released it last October, the instructions in the memo noted some specific pieces of information that OSEP was asking states to report to us on in terms of narrative in the appropriate indicators. And we asked that all states and entities include in the narrative for each impacted indicator the impact of COVID on data completeness, validity, and or reliability, an explanation of how COVID specifically impacted your ability to collect and verify the data for the indicator, and any steps you took to mitigate the impact of COVID on the data collection and verification. Last year, that information was very critical to us in our analysis and in us thinking about how we were going to make determinations, and it continued to be important this year, of course. We and OSEP appreciate the level of transparency regarding the impact of COVID when we read state submissions. You have all been extremely transparent in the challenges you faced throughout FFY20, which was 12 months worth of COVID data. And that information was very important to us as we think about how we're making decisions. When making determination decisions for 2022, OSEP considered all of the information that you submitted related to the impact of COVID. For instance, let's just give you an example, and this is a Part B example. We recognize the significant impact of COVID on the quality of the 2020 to 21 IDEA assessment data. We also know that last February, the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education sent a letter to chief state school officers offering flexibility with respect to assessments, among other areas. So as we're thinking about how we're finalizing determinations and over these next 2 weeks and in our internal discussions, we want to ensure that a state availing themselves of those flexibilities that were offered isn't going to negatively impact your determinations with respect to assessment. So, I just want you to know that the totality of information we have is what goes into us making decisions about determinations, and what you report to us in that level of transparency is extremely important. So for this year's determinations, no state or entity is receiving a determination of needs intervention due solely to data impacted by COVID. This is consistent with the policy bar we set last year. Last year, call around this time, I said the same thing then. And last year for FFY19, it was only about 3 months worth of COVID data that sort of we were working with. This year, we recognize it is an entire year's worth of COVID data. So same policy decision, no state or entity will be needs intervention solely because of COVID-19. Each state's determination letter is going to have specific language regarding any impact of COVID on the data collection and reporting that we considered when making determinations. And if a state had no data for an indicator because of COVID, or if the validity or reliability of a state's data was impacted by COVID, we have acknowledged that in OSEP response, and we did not penalize states in the 616 scoring on the data rubric for not having data for a particular indicator. So in those cases, it would have been scored as NA. Next slide, please, Shoshana. Thanks. So determinations, then what? So as I mentioned, June 22nd, we issue Part C determinations. June 23rd, we'll issue Part B. And then like what's going to be happening after that. So in the coming weeks, OSEP is going to be preparing the final documents from states to post on the IDEA website. So this includes the final DocX, which is your SPP APR submission and our OSEP response and analysis, with all of the 508 accessible attachments embedded, and the state's determination letter and any related OSEP attachments. So we're going to be preparing to post all of those documents publicly on the IDEA website. It takes some time because not only do we have to embed the attachments within this DocX, but we also have to apply any privacy suppression rules based on our approved privacy suppression sort of methodology. We also have to go in and manually do that. I want to remind you that states and entities are responsible for posting the final APR inclusive of OSEP responses and required actions, in addition to all attachments, including any that were not 508 compliant. So last year, we did not post any attachments that states submitted that were not 508 compliant. We will do the same thing again this year, but then it means that you as states, if you have attachments that were not 508 compliant that you submitted to us in your public posting of documents, you are going to want to make sure that you take care of posting those documents that OSEP is not able to post. So we just want to flag that for you. I think last year we had a few states where we had in OSEP response and required actions reminding states that we did not post particular documents because they were not 508 compliant, and the state needed to make sure that it was done within a particular timeline. And that was implemented in a variable sort of way among states. So we just do want to remind you that that is crucial. We are going to notify states when documents are live, but it will take a few weeks before we get those posted. I also wanted to flag, there's a bullet here about baseline and target revisions. As we've been reviewing submissions over the past few months, we recognize, it's a new package, new SPP, that there's obviously a lot of energy around baseline and targets at the beginning of an SPP cycle, right? You're setting targets for 6 years, you're working with your stakeholders. If there was a change in data source or methodology, you had to change your baseline. If there wasn't, I'm sure you're having conversations with stakeholders about if a baseline from that year still is a valid measure of that point in time, et cetera. But we also recognize that you are having to set targets for 6 years in the middle of COVID data. So we sort of recognize and understand and expect that states are probably going to be revising baselines and targets as the years roll on and as data sort of normalize. So we expect that you're going to be making additional changes to baselines and targets throughout the years of the SPP APR. Well, the SPP itself. We just want to remind you about the critical role that your diverse stakeholders play in that target setting and looking at baseline sort of space. So just want to flag that. I think some states have said in narrative that they expect to be revising baselines and targets, in the next year or two. Others might have remained silent on that in particular cases, which is fine, but we want you to know that this is something we expect to happen because we recognize the impact of COVID on the data. And finally, you should expect to hear from your OSEP state lead around the time that determinations are issued, offering to have a follow-up call with you to discuss determinations, answer any questions you have about OSEP analysis, or provide clarification about our analysis. Next slide, please, Shoshana. You can skip to the next one. So in terms of what to expect with engagement, in terms of engagement with OSEP. So we're thinking that after we issue determinations, we're looking at that July through the following January timeframe as time that we're really engaging with you states, thinking about technical assistance in terms of issues we saw or frequent sort of misunderstandings or lack of clarity around particular parts of submissions. We're looking at being able to have some in-depth conversations with you about our analysis and what we saw. Sometimes things might not rise to the level of an OSEP response or required action, but it might be something that a state lead took note of in terms of, hey, when we're in our monthly calls and in that technical assistance space, you know, digging a little bit deeper in terms of this area of concern for the state. We are looking forward to continued discussions with states around implementation of their OSEP. A number of states told us with this year's submission that they intend to revise their baselines actually next year. So we're going to be looking forward to engage with you during the next few months and learning a little bit more about what you're thinking, what's happening with implementation, et cetera. And just generally, I think we are going into this not thinking it's a one and done conversation right after determinations are issued, but our sustained engagement with you over monthly calls to ensure that we're able to clarify particular policy bars that OSEP has set, that you're able to share with us where there are places where you need additional clarification or there is confusion so that we could address those, getting those status updates and also helping you think through the sort of support you need from us to be able to push your work to the next level. As I mentioned, there are some areas where we think there's some need for additional clarification or TA from OSEP, and we're looking forward to connecting with our OSEP funded TA centers around some of those areas. Things like representativeness. So for C4, B8, and B14, some of those new requirements that states had to report to us on this year, saw some places where it would appear that there's some clarity might be needed, and we're hoping that we can provide that and support states in that space around OSEP implementation, sort of the impact of COVID on that, and us thinking about moving from, you know, the first cycle of implementation with the OSEP and now moving into this next cycle and being able to scale up and sustain that work. We also recognize that there are requirements regarding representativeness again that are going to hit for next year's submission. So for Part B states next year, the analysis of representativeness is going to have specific demographic categories that have to be included, like race, ethnicity. So we also want to think about how we prepare states for next year's submission when there are a few more requirements that are coming online that you have to speak to. That's just one example. So I think we want to share a TA plan with you over the summer. So stay tuned for that, how we're going to tee up some of these things and be able to best support you in some of those spaces. And that's all I have, but I can respond to questions if anyone has any. I'll give folks a minute, and while I'm giving them a minute, I'll look to see if anything is coming out in Q&A. Thanks, Alan. I'll take a look at it now. So you're, well, Alan, you outed yourself, I think, right? And said that it's in the Q&A. Yes, you did tell everyone that. I haven't named you unnecessarily. The question is, do we need to post APRs with OSEP responses and required actions, or can they be posted without those? We would expect that they would be posted inclusive of those. I know many states link back to our IDEA website to meet that requirement because we do post everyone's there. I think it gets tricky. Sometimes I've seen instances where states are referring back to old APRs on our site and the link is broken and whatnot, but yes, we would expect the full APR with everything to be posted. Certainly that's how we post them. But like I said, I know many states meet that requirement by linking to us. It just gets a little tricky if there's something that we have not posted that should have been posted. Like for instance, when we're thinking about 508 documents that have not been made 508 accessible that we are not able to post, that then the state is going to have to take responsibility in making sure that that full suite of information is posted.
Christine, there's another question here.
Oh, wait, hold on. I don't see the other one, Greg. What is the other question?
From an anonymous attendee.
Oh,
Where
okay.
can-
Woo-hoo.
Could you see it now?
Yes, I can see. Where can states find the additional requirements for representativeness? Is everything in the measurement table, or is there something that will be new in the instructions that will be coming? Everything that you have to respond to is in the measurement table and found in the instructions. So that the instructions column in the measurement table is that last column to the right. I think we use the SPP APR instructions and memo to provide any additional clarity around particular things. So if there's anything noted there, it might be from a clarity standpoint, if we feel like we need to add something to provide some clarity and that's the vehicle to do it, but we would never put additional reporting requirements within the SPP APR instructions. I hope that's helpful. And I see another anonymous attendee question. Does the ICC letter need to be posted as well, or is it just verified by OSEP? That's a good question. It is verified by us. I would have to look back. Y'all are gonna make me pull out my regs. I don't know that you have a requirement to post it. I don't think so. I'm gonna go with no, but I'm gonna follow up with you if I'm wrong, because we do not have a requirement to post it. We just need to see it because that's how you're certifying your submission. So I do not think so. Greg, you would correct me if you think I'm way off base, but no, I don't think there's any requirement.
I don't have a definitive answer to that other than, probably to play it safe. I would advise the state to go ahead and post it.
Yeah.
But I'm like you, I don't know that there's a requirement.
Yeah. But for transparency's sake, I think, in the spirit of transparency, it is always a good thing to post these documents.
Always, always.
Always.
Do you see the question from Valerie Arnold?
Is my understanding that there have been no substantive changes to the RDA matrix from prior year being used for 2022 determinations. Will you please confirm? Yes, I can confirm. So Valerie, if you need me to say more, then yes, I can confirm. OSEP would typically signal to states if we were going to make changes to the way we make determinations, and we would usually signal that a year in advance. We don't typically have surprises at the end and sort of whip out a new element or a factor that has never been present before. So, and once again, we have recognized that it is a year's worth of COVID data, and we made a particular decision last year when we were dealing with 3 months worth of COVID data that nobody would be needs intervention solely because of COVID, and have retained that decision for this year as well. Question regarding, can we get APR templates, et cetera, posted earlier this year? So Alan, do you mean, I'm assuming you do not mean, yes, you mean what comes from the contractor in terms of the template that looks like the system that you guys are able to use? I'm guessing that's what you mean. I don't think you mean the SPP APR instructions or the memo or any of those other things, because that usually comes in October or so. So I'm guessing you mean that state template that AEM puts out. We will try our best to see what we can do to get them out earlier. After determinations, and we work with the contractor to make sure that the system is set up to capture everything we need it to in next year's submission. There are no major changes. Next year, we had a lot of changes we had to make for this year because it was a new information collection, and there were particular things that were different in terms of data sources, new sub-indicators for Part B, way more changes in B than C. But we will look moving into next year, anything that needs to be done, and we'll do our best. How about this, Alan? When you say earlier, like how early? Drop that in the Q&A and tell me. I can't make any promises, but just curious. While you're doing that, next question, will how the department made determinations document be made available prior to June 23rd? No, it's issued when we issue determinations. It's not made public prior to that. Sorry. But I have told you that we have not made any major changes to how we make determinations. So you want them in September. I think it might be like closer to October for the measurement table, which would only be technical edits to that, of course, the SPP APR instructions and the memo. We'll see what we can do. How soon will the system open next year? This is usually a big question from you guys because December, I know, is nothing that makes anybody feel great about the date it opens, and I know everyone desires it to be opened earlier. There are some things that impact our ability to open and dictate when we're able to open. Some of those are tied to when we get specific 618 data submissions sent to OSEP. And for indicators where they're relying on those data, like we have to get the data in to then be able to pre-fill it in the system and whatnot to be able to open. So assessment data is a big one because assessment data isn't due until usually the 3rd week of December or so. And then we get the data, have to review the data, approve the files that the data are going to come from to pre-fill in the system. So those are some of the things that hold us back. But I do recognize that the earlier we can get it open, it will make you guys happier. But sorry, I have trouble as questions are coming in and I'm talking. I'm like my kid, apparently. I see a shiny thing. So in any case, we know that you like it opened earlier. We're bound by some of the 618 data collections and when those come in, so that impacts it. But we continue to look to see what we might be able to do to support states in having everything they can to be able to submit timely. Question about where we can access the sessions recording after this. It will be posted. I don't know if anybody can drop that link in the chat if Diana or someone else is on, generally where it is posted. When will OSEP talk with states about determinations criteria OSEP will use in 2023? This is important for states using a similar methodology to make LEA determinations. So as I've mentioned, OSEP would signal to states a year before we plan to make any changes to how we make determinations. We would signal we're thinking about some changes. If there's anything changing for next year, we would have to signal that in this year's determination letter. So there would have to be something in the determination letters you'll get on June 22nd and June 23rd, signaling what we're thinking about changing or that we're thinking about making particular changes. The administration is very committed, I know, to hearing from folks and making sure that, that they've gotten stakeholder thoughts and input and feedback as we're having discussions about any changes we would make. And I am confident that our senior leadership would be engaging with the pertinent organizations to make sure that they're hearing from their participant base to make sure that they have a good sense of what's happening with states and what states are wrangling with. I don't know if Greg would like to add anything else to that, but
I think you were very eloquent. I will point out, however, that Diana has just added to the chat the link where the recording can be
Awesome.
found.
Thank you, Diana. But I will share for the person who asked the question about if we're going to talk to states about determinations criteria that we may use in 2023 because of, sort of states are using the similar methodology and would like to know earlier rather than later. I will take that back to senior leadership and make sure that they are aware that there's some questions in the field about what our plans are for next year and the desire to share that as soon as possible. There's a lot of input gathered by OSEP Rookie. Yes, that got put on hold by COVID. States would very much like to have robust conversations before changes are made. Thank you for that, Mary. Yes, we did get a lot of input a few years ago. I remember that. That's when we were still in person, right, for a leadership conference, and we had sessions, and we got your thoughts around including the OSEP and determinations in a number of areas, right? So yes, I am confident that the current administration and our senior leadership team would be just as invested in hearing from the field before we make any major changes moving forward. So I would stay tuned for that. And I'm sure that Greg is making note that we've had a number of questions, at least 2, but I'll say a number because some more might come around this. And so we can make sure that that's teed up. I'm going to be a little busy for the next 2 weeks trying to get 2022 determinations out the door, but I'm confident that after that, there will be some discussions and energy in terms of thinking about what we will be doing in 2023 and which will be led by our administration and senior leadership team. Any other questions?
We may have reached the end of the questions. I'm not seeing any more. Alan says, thank you.
You're welcome, Alan. As always, you guys know where to find us if you have questions. There are many of you that know how to find me even a little better than others know how to find me. But for the next 2 weeks, we really have that last push to be able to get determinations out the door on time and make sure that everything is accurate. And we've gone through all of our rigorous QA checks. And we look forward to engaging with you beyond that around the work. So I don't know, Greg, or you want to end us, or if Shoshana will do the honors.
I think we're getting a lot of thank yous, and I'll add my thank you. Christine, you did a great job of summarizing some pretty complicated material, but thank you for giving everybody a good idea of what to expect on June 22nd and June 23rd when those determinations come out. And appreciate everybody signing in today and listening to it. And if you want to listen to it again or go back over any details, the recording will be posted at the site that was listed in the chat. So if there's nothing more, we bid you a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.